She texted from Barcelona. Extended to 2 weeks. Amazing time with the girls. I replied, hope you and Ken are having fun. Divorce papers are waiting. What I found next made my blood run cold. A credit card in my name I never opened. Money missing. And a truth about my son that would change everything. But I wasn't backing down. My name is Thomas Bradford. I'm 44 years old. And for the past 15 years, I've been the director of operations at Meridian Manufacturing, a mid-sized industrial equipment company with just over 200 employees. It's demanding work, but honest work, and it's given me and my family a comfortable life. My wife, Melissa, is 33, works as a marketing manager at a tech firm downtown, and we have a 4-year-old son named Elijah, who's the light of my life. I was sitting in my home office on a Thursday afternoon, reviewing production reports, when my phone buzzed. A text from Melissa. She'd left 5 days earlier for what she called a girls' trip to Barcelona with 3 of her college friends. The message read, Barcelona with the girls, extended to 2 weeks. Amazing time. 3 heart emojis followed, along with a photo of tapas and wine glasses on some restaurant table. I stared at the screen, my coffee going cold in my hand. 2 weeks. She originally said 5 days, maybe a week tops. We discussed the budget, plan around my work schedule, so I could handle Elijah's daycare pickups, coordinated everything down to the day. Now she was doubling the trip without so much as a phone call first. I set the phone down and walked to the window, watching Elijah play in the backyard with his toy trucks. Mrs. Patterson from next door had agreed to watch him for a few hours while I caught up on work from home. The kid was laughing, completely unaware that his mother had just decided he wasn't worth coming home to on schedule. Something twisted in my chest, something that had been building for months. The late nights at work, she claimed, were mandatory. The new gym membership, she just had to have. The way she'd started dressing different, acting different, like she was auditioning for a role in someone else's life. I picked up my phone again and opened the folder I've been keeping on my laptop for the past 3 weeks. Files labeled financial records, communications log, legal consultation notes. I'd prepared for this moment, even though part of me had hoped I'd never need to use any of it. My fingers moved across the screen, typing a response I'd rehearsed a dozen times in my head. Hope you and Ken are having fun. A divorce petition is waiting here. I hit send before I could second-guess myself. Then I blocked her number, her social media, her email. Every avenue of communication, gone in 30 seconds. The phone stayed quiet for exactly 4 minutes. Then my phone started ringing. Not Melissa's number, that was blocked. Her mother's number. I let it ring out. Then her father called. I ignored that one too. By the time the 5th call came through, this time from her sister, I'd already powered down the phone and slipped it into my desk drawer. I walked outside to where Elijah was playing. The boy looked up at me with those huge brown eyes, dirt smudged on his cheek, and grinned. Daddy, look, I made a parking lot. I knelt down beside him, running my hand through his hair. That's amazing, buddy. You're doing great. He went back to his trucks, content in his little world. I stayed there on the grass, watching him play, knowing that everything was about to change. But for now, in this moment, he was happy, and I was going to fight like hell to keep him that way. The next morning, I woke up at 5:30, same as always. Elijah was still asleep, his small chest rising and falling under his dinosaur blanket. I stood in the doorway for a moment, just watching him. For years old, and already he'd been through more than he knew. The question that had haunted me for weeks now fell heavier than ever. Was he even mine? I pushed the thought away and headed downstairs. First things first, I'd spent weeks preparing for this moment, and now it was time to execute the plan I'd laid out with my attorney, Patricia Reeves. She was sharp, thorough, and had seen enough cases like mine to know exactly what needed to happen. By 7 a.m., I had the locksmith at the house. Professional guy, didn't ask questions, just changed every lock on every door. Front, back garage, even the side gate. New keys, new codes, new everything. When he handed me the fresh set, it felt like taking back territory that had been occupied by enemy forces. Next, I drove to the bank. The joint account we'd maintained for years got frozen with a single conversation and some paperwork Patricia had prepared. I transferred exactly half to a new account in my name only, then set up automatic payments for the mortgage, utilities, and Elijah's daycare. Everything documented, everything legal, everything by the book. At 9:15, I was standing in Patricia's office downtown, signing papers. She slid the divorce petition across her desk. Already notarized. Already perfect. This is comprehensive, Patricia said, tapping the thick folder beside it. Bank records showing the cash withdrawals, the credit card charges from restaurants you never went to, hotel bookings. Phone records with Kenneth Stevens' number appearing 217 times in the past 4 months. I nodded. And the other thing. She pulled out another folder, this one thinner. The paternity test request. We'll file it as part of the proceedings. Given the timeline and circumstances, the court will likely grant it. My jaw tightened. How long? For the test results? 2 weeks, maybe 3. For her to be served, she'll get the papers within 48 hours of landing back in the States. I signed everything, my hand steady. No hesitation. This wasn't anger, it was clarity. For months, I'd been living in a fog of suspicion and doubt. Now I was walking in sunlight, cold and harsh as it was. By noon, I was back home. I'd picked up Elijah from daycare early, told them there was a family situation and he'd be staying with me full-time for the foreseeable future. They didn't pry. I've been the one doing pickups and drop-offs for the past 6 months anyway. Elijah and I had lunch together, grilled cheese and tomato soup. He chattered about his friend Mason and something about a turtle they'd seen in a book. I listened, really listened, in a way I hadn't been able to for weeks. My phone sat on the counter, still powered off. I knew it was waiting for me when I turned it on. Voicemails, texts from her parents, probably threats, definitely begging. But that could wait. Right now, my son needed me present, not distracted by the chaos I'd set in motion. After lunch, while Elijah napped, I went through the house methodically. Her cosmetics from the bathroom, boxed. Her clothes from the closet, boxed. The expensive perfume she'd bought last month, the one she said made her feel confident, boxed. Every trace of her, removed like surgical excision of diseased tissue. By the time I was done, 3 boxes sat by the garage door, ready to be dropped at her parents' house. I wasn't being cruel. I was being efficient. The house felt different already. Lighter somehow. Like a weight I'd been carrying for months had finally been set down. I looked around the living room, at the photos still on the walls. Our wedding, Elijah as a baby, family vacations that now felt like scenes from someone else's life. Those would come down later. For now, I had more important things to handle. 3 days after I'd sent that text, I was sitting in a coffee shop 2 blocks from my office, waiting for someone I never thought I'd need to meet. His name was David Harper. Private investigator, former cop, came highly recommended by Patricia. He slid into the booth across from me, a manila folder under his arm. Mid-50s, graying hair, the kind of face that had seen too much and remembered all of it. He didn't waste time with pleasantries. Mr. Bradford, Harper said, opening the folder. You were right to call me. Your wife's been busy. He spread out printouts across the table. Bank statements, credit card receipts, travel itineraries. My eyes went straight to the numbers. $47,000. That's how much had disappeared from our savings account over the past 8 months through cash withdrawals and transfers I'd never authorized. How? I asked, my voice tight. She had access to your accounts. Joint accounts are easy targets. Harper tapped one receipt. This one's interesting. Hotel charge in Chicago, 4 months ago. The Langham, Presidential Suite. 3 nights. You were in town for a conference then, weren't you? I nodded slowly. Meridian's annual operations summit. I stayed at the Marriott near McCormick Place. She stayed at the Langham, with Kenneth Stevens. He checked in under his name. She joined him later. Harper pulled out another sheet. And this receipt here, from a jewelry store. $18,000 for a Rolex. That match anything you own? No, didn't think so. My guess is she bought it for Stevens as a gift. The coffee in my cup had gone cold, but I didn't care. I was too focused on the paper trail of my wife's betrayal, laid out in black and white like evidence at a crime scene. Harper continued. There's more. She opened a separate credit card 6 months ago, different bank. Paperwork shows your forged signature. Racked up $32,000 in charges. Fancy restaurants, hotels, weekend getaways. The billing address goes to a P.O. box she rented under a fake business name. I sat back, processing. This wasn't just an affair. This was systematic theft. What about Stevens? I asked. Harper's expression darkened. Kenneth Stevens, 51, divorced twice, currently engaged to his 3rd victim. I mean fiancé. Runs a consulting firm that's mostly smoke and mirrors. He's got a type. Married women, preferably younger, preferably with money. Your wife fits the pattern perfectly. His fiancée knows about this. Not yet, but she will. I've got documentation ready to send her way if you want. I thought about that. Some woman out there, planning a wedding, thinking she'd found her happily ever after with a man who was currently in Barcelona with my wife. Did she deserve to know? Absolutely. Send it, I replied. Harper nodded and gathered the papers back into the folder. One more thing. The paternity test your attorney mentioned. I did some digging. Your wife had a relationship in college with a guy named Jason Wright. They broke up right before graduation. Messy split from what I found. He's a teacher now. Lives in Ohio. Thing is, your wife visited Ohio 5 years ago for what she told you was a work conference. My stomach dropped. 5 years ago. That's when she got pregnant with Elijah. Yeah, Harper confirmed, his voice softer now. Timeline matches up. I pulled phone records. She called Wright's number 17 times that month. After Elijah was born, the calls stopped completely. I stared at the table, my mind racing. Everything I'd built my life around, every assumption, every belief, all of it crumbling like a sand castle at high tide. Harper slid a business card across to me. This is a DNA testing lab. Private, discreet, fast results. You're going to want answers, Mr. Bradford. Better to know now than wonder forever. I took the card, tucked it into my wallet. What do I owe you? Your attorney's already handled it. But I'll keep digging if you need me to. Keep digging, I said. I want to know everything. That evening, I was making dinner for Elijah when my phone rang. Unknown number, but local area code. Against my better judgment, I answered. Thomas Bradford. The voice was female, shaky, on the edge of tears. Speaking. My name is Jennifer Carlson. I'm engaged to Kenneth Stevens. I turned off the stove burner and walked into my office, closing the door behind me. Elijah was watching cartoons in the living room, safe and distracted. This conversation needed my full attention. Go on, I said carefully. Jennifer's voice broke. I got an email this morning. Photos, documents, receipts. Your investigator sent them. Kenneth and your wife, they've been... I didn't want to believe it, but I called Kenneth's assistant, and she confirmed he's been in Barcelona for the past week. He told me he was at a consulting conference in Denver. I sat down at my desk, the weight of her pain coming through the phone like a physical force. I'm sorry you had to find out this way. How long have you known? She asked. Suspected for months. Confirmed it a few days ago when she texted me from Barcelona about extending her trip. That's when I filed for divorce. Silence on her end, then a sound like she was trying to compose herself. They spent my money, Jennifer said quietly. I gave Kenneth $40,000 3 months ago. He said it was for expanding his business, that we'd be partners. He spent it on her, on hotels, on jewelry, on this trip to Spain. I saw the receipts in the email. My money paid for their affair. My hand tightened around the phone. Did you confront him? I broke off the engagement an hour ago. Called him in Barcelona, told him everything. He denied it at first, then tried to blame your wife. Said she seduced him, that he was vulnerable after his last divorce. I hung up on him. Good, I replied. He doesn't deserve an explanation. Your wife was there when I called. Jennifer continued. I heard her voice in the background, asking who was on the phone. Kenneth told her it was nobody important. That's when I knew for sure. I was nobody important. Just a checkbook with a heartbeat. I exhaled slowly. What are you going to do? I already did it. I called my attorney, froze all my accounts, filed a civil suit against Kenneth for fraud. He's not getting away with this. Neither is she. There was steel in her voice now, the kind that comes when grief transforms into resolve. I recognized it because I'd heard the same tone in my own voice 3 days ago. If you need anything, I said, witness testimony, documentation, anything I can provide to help your case, it's yours. Thank you, Jennifer replied. And Thomas? I know this doesn't help much right now, but your son is lucky to have a father who's willing to fight for him. Whatever happens with the paternity test, don't let it change how you see him. He's innocent in all this. Her words hit harder than I expected. I won't, I promised. After we hung up, I sat in the silence of my office, staring at the family photo on my desk. Melissa, Elijah, and me at the beach last summer. All of us smiling, all of us pretending everything was fine. I turned the frame face down. In the living room, Elijah laughed at something on TV, his voice bright and unburdened. He didn't know yet that his mother might not be coming home. He didn't know that the man he called Daddy might not be his biological father. He didn't know that his entire world was built on lies. But he would know he was loved. No matter what the DNA test said, no matter what legal battles lay ahead, Elijah would know that I chose him. Every single day, I would choose him. That was the one truth I could control in a life that had become nothing but questions. The testing center was in a nondescript medical building off Highway 94, the kind of place you drive past 100 times without noticing. I carried Elijah inside on a Tuesday morning, his small hand clutching his favorite stuffed dinosaur. "Where are we going, Daddy?" Elijah asked, his voice curious but not worried. At 4 years old, medical offices were just places with lollipops at the end. "Just a quick appointment, buddy," I replied, keeping my voice light. "They need to check something, and then we'll go get pancakes." "Sound good." His face lit up. "With chocolate chips. With as many chocolate chips as you want." The technician was a kind woman in her 50s named Rosa. She knelt down to Elijah's level, showing him the swab kit like it was a magic trick. "I'm going to rub this soft stick on the inside of your cheek, okay? It tickles a little bit, but it doesn't hurt at all." Elijah opened his mouth obediently, and 30 seconds later, it was done. Rosa took my sample next, sealed everything in labeled vials, and handed me paperwork. "Results in 10 to 14 days. We'll call you first, then send the official report to your attorney." I nodded, signed where she indicated, and took Elijah out to the car. He chattered about pancakes the whole drive to IHOP, completely unaware that his entire identity might be about his shift. 8 days later, Patricia called. I was at work, reviewing a production schedule for a client in Detroit, when her name appeared on my phone. My stomach dropped before I even answered. "Thomas," Patricia said, her voice carefully neutral. The results came back. I stepped out of my office into the empty hallway, my heart pounding. "And Elijah is not your biological son." The words hung in the air like smoke after an explosion. I leaned against the wall, suddenly needing its support. Patricia continued, her voice softer now. "I'm sorry, Thomas. I know this isn't what you hoped for. But listen to me carefully. This doesn't change your legal standing. You're on the birth certificate. You've been his father since day one. We're going to fight for full custody, and we're going to win." "Does Melissa know?" I asked, my voice rough. "She'll be served with the results along with the amended divorce petition when she lands tomorrow. We're including evidence of fraud, both financial and paternal. The court will not be sympathetic to her position." After we hung up, I stood in that hallway for a full 5 minutes, just breathing. Elijah wasn't mine. Biologically, he belonged to Jason Wright, some teacher in Ohio who'd had a weekend with my wife 5 years ago and disappeared back into his life, probably with no idea he'd fathered child. But biology is just DNA. Fatherhood is showing up. It's the middle of the night fevers, the scraped knees kissed better, the bedtime stories read in funny voices. It's teaching him to tie his shoes and catching him when he jumps off the couch convinced he can fly. I'd been Elijah's father for 4 years. That didn't stop just because a lab report said his genes came from someone else. I walked back into my office, closed the door, and called my brother Jake. He answered on the second ring. "Tom, what's up? I need you to do me a favor," I said. "Can you pick up Elijah from daycare today and take him to your place for the night? Something's come up, and I need to handle it before I see him." "Everything okay?" Jake asked, concern in his voice. "It will be. I just need tonight to process some things. He can stay as long as you need. The kid would love it." That evening, alone in my house, I went into Elijah's room. His toy trucks were scattered across the floor, his dinosaur blanket tangled on the bed, his drawings taped to the walls. A family portrait he'd made at preschool showed 3 stick figures, Mommy, Daddy, and me. He'd drawn a son in the corner with a smiling face. I sat on his bed, holding that drawing, and made a decision. Jason Wright could have contributed DNA, but I was Elijah's father. Tomorrow, when Melissa landed and discovered the truth she'd been hiding for years, she'd try to use this against me. She'd argue I had no claim to her son. She was wrong. Elijah was my son, and I'd fight heaven and hell to prove it. Melissa's flight landed at O'Hare at 3:15 on Wednesday afternoon. I knew because I tracked it online, the same way I'd been tracking everything else about her movements for the past 2 weeks. Kenneth Stevens was on the same flight, seated in 12B while she sat in 12A. Cozy. Patricia had arranged for a process server to meet them at baggage claim. Professional guy, experienced with high conflict cases. He waited by Carousel 7 with 2 sets of papers. Divorce petition for Melissa, civil suit for Kenneth courtesy of Jennifer Carlson's attorney. I wasn't there. Didn't need to be. Patricia had someone recording the whole thing on their phone, discreetly, from a distance. She'd send me the video later. Instead, I was at home with Elijah, who I'd picked up from Jake's house that morning. We were building a castle out of wooden blocks when my phone buzzed. Patricia texting. She's been served. Kenneth too. Both are reacting poorly. I could imagine. Melissa, tanned and relaxed from 2 weeks in Barcelona, suddenly hit with divorce papers detailing her affair, the stolen money, and the paternity fraud. Kenneth, served with a lawsuit from his ex-fiancée for fraud and emotional distress. Both of them standing in the middle of O'Hare International Airport, their carefully constructed lies collapsing in real time. My phone rang 10 minutes later. Melissa's mother, Carol. I let go to voicemail. Then her father, Richard. Voicemail. Then Melissa herself, from a number I didn't recognize, probably borrowed from someone at the airport. I blocked it. At 4:30, my doorbell rang. I looked through the peephole and saw Carol standing on my porch, her face red and tear-streaked. Behind her was Richard, looking older than I remembered. I opened the door but didn't invite them in. Carol. Richard. Carol's voice came out in a rush, desperate and pleading. Thomas, please. Melissa called us from the airport. She's devastated. This is all a horrible misunderstanding. There's no misunderstanding, I replied calmly. Your daughter had an affair with Kenneth Stevens for at least 6 months. She stole $47,000 from our accounts. And she lied about Elijah's paternity for 4 years. Those are facts, not misunderstandings. Richard stepped forward, trying for a reasonable tone. Thomas, I know you're hurt and angry, but think about Elijah. He needs his mother. He needs stability. I corrected. He needs a parent who doesn't abandon him for weeks at a time to vacation with her boyfriend. He needs someone who tells the truth. You're not even his real father. Carol blurted out, then immediately looked horrified at her own words. The silence that followed was arctic. I looked at her with an expression cold enough to freeze water. I've been his father since the day he was born. I've fed him, clothed him, loved him, raised him. Jason Wright contributed DNA. I contributed everything else. So yes, Carol, I am his real father. The only one he's ever known. Richard put his hand on Carol's arm, trying to calm her, but she shook him off. Melissa made a mistake. One mistake, 5 years ago. Are you really going to punish her forever? One mistake. I almost laughed. She's been having an affair for 6 months. She stole nearly $50,000. She lied about paternity for 4 years. That's not one mistake, Carol. That's a pattern of deception. She wants to come home, Richard said quietly. She wants to talk to you, to see Elijah, to try to fix this. The locks have been changed, I replied. This isn't her home anymore, and she's not seeing Elijah until the court decides custody arrangements. Carol's face crumpled. You can't keep her from her son. I'm not keeping her from anyone. The legal system will determine what's best for Elijah. Until then, he stays with me, in a stable environment, with a parent who didn't abandon him for a European vacation with her lover. I started to close the door, but Richard spoke up one more time. Thomas, please. At least let her talk to Elijah on the phone. He must be confused about where she is. I paused, considering, then shook my head. Elijah thinks his mother is still traveling. When he asks about her, I tell him she'll be home when she's ready. I'm not going to put him in the middle of this mess or let Melissa use him as an emotional bargaining chip. When the court says she can have supervised visitation, we'll arrange it. Until then, no contact. I closed the door on their protests, locked it, and walked back to the living room where Elijah was still playing with his blocks. He looked up at me with those big brown eyes. Who was at the door, Daddy? Nobody important, buddy. I replied, sitting down beside him. Let's finish this castle. For days after Melissa landed back in the States, David Harper called me with news that made my blood boil. I was at my office, finishing up a production meeting, when his name appeared on my screen. Mr. Bradford, I've got something you need to see, Harper said, his voice grim. Can you meet me in an hour? We met at the same coffee shop, same booth. He slid a folder across the table, thicker than the last one. Your wife opened a credit card 8 months ago, Harper began. Used your information. Forged your signature on the application. Different bank than your primary accounts, which is why you didn't catch it. The billing address went to a P.O. box she rented under a fake business name. Meridian Marketing Solutions. I opened the folder, scanning the statements. Charge after charge, all for luxury items and experiences I'd never authorized. The total at the bottom made my stomach turn. $32,000. That's not all, Harper continued. She also withdrew money from Elijah's education fund. You'd set up a $529 plan for him, right? Been contributing $500 a month since he was born. Yes, I said, my jaw tightening. That account should have over $25,000 in it by now. Harper slid another document across. It has $800. She's been withdrawing funds for the past year. Small amounts at first, then larger chunks. The last withdrawal was 2 weeks before she left for Barcelona. $15,000, cleaned out in one transaction. My hands clenched into fists on the table. She'd stolen from our son, from the future I'd been carefully building for Elijah, regardless of whose DNA he carried. That money was supposed to pay for college, for opportunities, for a foundation in life. Where did it go? I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. Combination of things. Someone to Kenneth Stevens directly. I found transfers to his business account labeled as consulting fees. Some went to cash withdrawals, and some went to jewelry purchases. There's a receipt here for a Rolex she bought him 3 months ago. $18,000. Paid for with money from Elijah's college fund. I stared at the receipt, at the casual way my wife had robbed our son's future to buy gifts for her lover. This wasn't just betrayal anymore. This was theft. Criminal theft. What are my options? I asked Harper. Your attorney can file criminal charges for fraud and identity theft. The forged credit card application alone is a felony. Add in the education fund theft, and you're looking at serious legal consequences for her. Do it, I said immediately. File everything. I want her to face every legal consequence available. Harper nodded. There's one more thing. The credit card? It's still active. She used it yesterday at a hotel in Chicago. The Drake Hotel, Presidential Suite. Checked in under her maiden name. Kenneth's with her. Can't confirm, but the room is a double occupancy charge. I sat back, processing. Even after being served with divorce papers, even after being exposed, Melissa was still with Kenneth. Still spending money she'd stolen. Still living like consequences were for other people. Give me proof, I told Harper. Photos, video, whatever you can get. I want documentation that she's continuing the affair even after being served. Consider it done, Harper replied. And Mr. Bradford, your son is lucky to have you fighting for him. Not many men would stick around after finding out the paternity situation. I met his eyes. Elijah is my son. DNA doesn't change that. And I'll be damned if I let Melissa destroy his future the way she's tried to destroy mine. The call from Jennifer Carlson came on Saturday morning. I was making breakfast for Elijah, scrambled eggs and toast, when my phone rang. Thomas, it's Jennifer. I wanted you to know. Kenneth's firm just collapsed. I set down the spatula and stepped into the hallway. Elijah was watching cartoons in the living room, safely distracted. What happened? Jennifer's voice carried a note of grim satisfaction. My lawsuit exposed his financial irregularities. Turns out he'd been embezzling from clients for years, hiding it behind shell companies and fake invoices. When my attorneys started digging, it all came apart. The state licensing board launched an investigation yesterday. His clients are fleeing, his partners are lawyering up, and his bank accounts have been frozen pending the fraud investigation. Good, I said simply. There's more. His ex-wives both filed claims against him for unpaid alimony and child support. Apparently, he's been dodging payments for years. Between my lawsuit, the criminal investigation, and the back payments he owes, Kenneth Stevens is looking at financial ruin and possible jail time. I absorbed that information, feeling a cold sense of justice. And Melissa? She's still with him. According to my investigator. Checked into some hotel in Chicago together 3 days ago. I guess she thinks love conquers bankruptcy and criminal charges. After we hung up, I made a decision. I called Patricia and told her about Kenneth's collapse. That's useful, Patricia said. It shows Melissa's judgment is severely compromised. She's choosing to stay with a man facing criminal charges rather than focus on her own legal situation or her relationship with Elijah. The court will take note of that. The preliminary custody hearing was scheduled for the following Thursday. Patricia had prepared meticulously evidence of the affair, the financial fraud, the paternity deception, Melissa's continued relationship with Kenneth despite his legal troubles, and my documented involvement in Elijah's daily care. We're asking for full physical custody with supervised visitation for Melissa, Patricia explained during our prep session. We'll argue that her pattern of deception, financial irresponsibility, and poor judgment makes her unsuitable for joint custody. What are our chances? I asked. Strong. The judge will see a father who's been present and responsible versus a mother who abandoned her child for a 2-week vacation with her lover, stole from the child's education fund, and continues a relationship with a man under criminal investigation. The optics are terrible for her. Thursday came. I wore my best suit, arrived early, sat in the courtroom with Patricia beside me. Melissa arrived 10 minutes late, looking haggard, her attorney a harried-looking woman who clearly had been handed a nightmare case. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s named Margaret Flynn, reviewed the filings with an expression that grew progressively more severe. When she finally looked up, her gaze went straight to Melissa. Ms. Bradford, Judge Flynn said, and I noticed you didn't use Mrs. I've reviewed the evidence presented by your husband's attorney. The affair, the forged credit card, the depletion of your son's education fund, the paternity fraud. Do you dispute any of these facts? Melissa's attorney stood. Your Honor, my client acknowledges certain mistakes were made, but I asked Ms. Bradford. Judge Flynn interrupted. Ma'am, do you dispute these facts? Melissa's voice came out small. No, Your Honor. And you're currently residing with Mr. Kenneth Stevens, who is under investigation for fraud. We're friends, Your Honor. Judge Flynn's expression could have frozen lava. Friends who share hotel rooms. I see. She looked down at her papers again. Temporary custody is awarded to Mr. Thomas Bradford. Ms. Bradford will have supervised visitation, 2 hours per week, location to be determined by the court-appointed supervisor. We'll reconvene in 60 days for a full custody hearing. The gavel came down. Just like that, Elijah was legally under my full protection. The supervised visitation sessions happened every Saturday at a neutral facility downtown. A court-appointed supervisor named Angela sat in the corner, taking notes while Melissa spent her 2 hours with Elijah. I drop him off and return to pick him up, never seeing Melissa face to face. That arrangement worked fine for me. But on the 4th Saturday, Angela called me before the session. Her voice was concerned. Mr. Bradford, I need to tell you something. Last week, Ms. Bradford tried to coach Elijah. She was asking him leading questions like, don't you miss living with Mommy? And wouldn't it be nice if Mommy came home? I intervened, but I wanted you to know she's attempting to manipulate the child. Thank you for telling me, I replied. Is this going in your report to the court? Absolutely. Any attempt to alienate the child from the custodial parent or manipulate them emotionally is documented. That Tuesday, Patricia called with an update on the final custody hearing, now just 2 weeks away. Kenneth Stevens took a plea deal, she said. 3 years in federal prison for fraud and embezzlement. He starts serving his sentence next month. Jennifer's civil suit is settled, and he's paying restitution to multiple victims. And Melissa? I asked. Her attorney filed a motion claiming she was a victim of Kenneth's manipulation, that she didn't understand the financial crimes were happening. The judge isn't buying it. Between the paternity fraud, the theft from Elijah's education fund, and her continued attempts to manipulate the child during visitation, she's not getting joint custody. Best case for her is expanded supervised visitation. The week before the final hearing, Melissa's parents showed up at my office. Security called me from the lobby. Mr. Bradford, there's a Carol and Richard Henley here, asking to see you. I considered refusing, then decided to hear them out. Maybe they'd finally accepted reality. I had them brought to a conference room. Carol looked older than I remembered, her face drawn with stress. Richard sat beside her, his shoulders slumped. Thomas, Carol began, her voice wavering. We wanted to ask you, for Elijah's sake, to consider dropping the custody fight. Melissa has been in therapy. She's trying to change. No, I cut her off. Richard leaned forward. Just hear us out. She made mistakes, terrible mistakes, but she's still Elijah's mother. Maybe you could agree to joint custody, ease her back into his life gradually. I looked at them both calmly. Elijah's mother stole from his college fund to buy gifts for her boyfriend. She lied about his paternity for 4 years. She abandoned him for 2 weeks to vacation in Europe with a criminal. And even after being caught, after losing temporary custody, she's still trying to manipulate him during visitations. Those aren't mistakes. That's a pattern of behavior. Carol's eyes filled with tears. He's not even your biological son. Why are you fighting so hard? Because I'm his father, I replied simply. DNA doesn't determine that. Being there every day determines that. And I've been there since day one, which is more than I can say for Melissa these past 6 months. They left without another word. I went back to work, my resolve harder than ever. The final custody hearing took place on a cold November morning. I sat beside Patricia, watching Judge Flynn review the mountains of evidence we'd compiled over 3 months. Melissa sat across the courtroom with her attorney, looking diminished somehow, like she'd finally realized the weight of what she'd lost. Judge Flynn looked up. I've reviewed the case file extensively. Ms. Bradford, your actions over the past year demonstrate a pattern of deception, financial irresponsibility, and poor judgment that makes joint custody untenable. Mr. Bradford has proven himself to be a stable, responsible parent who prioritizes the child's well-being above all else. She adjusted her glasses. Full legal and physical custody is awarded to Thomas Bradford. Ms. Bradford will have supervised visitation for hours per month, with the possibility of expansion after 1 year of demonstrated stability and completion of court-ordered therapy. The gavel came down. Final. Permanent. Elijah was mine. Outside the courthouse, Patricia shook my hand. Congratulations, Thomas. You fought hard for that boy. He's worth fighting for, I replied. 8 months later, life had settled into a new rhythm. Elijah started kindergarten, made friends, thrived in ways I hadn't seen when Melissa was still around. The tension that used to hang in our house was gone, replaced by something lighter. Melissa attended her monthly supervised visits, though Elijah showed less interest each time. She'd become more of an aunt figure than a mother, someone he saw occasionally but didn't particularly miss. Jennifer Carlson and I stayed in touch. She'd moved on, started dating a teacher she met through mutual friends, seemed genuinely happy. We met for coffee sometimes, two people who'd survived similar betrayals and come out stronger. One Saturday afternoon, I took Elijah to the park. He ran ahead to the playground, his laughter carrying back to me on the wind. I stood there watching him, this boy who'd become my son not through biology, but through choice, through commitment, through love. My phone buzzed. A text from my brother Jake, bringing the kids over for dinner tonight. Sarah's making her famous lasagna. You in? I smiled and typed back. We'll be there. Family wasn't about DNA or perfect circumstances. It was about showing up, staying present, choosing to love even when it was hard. I'd learned that lesson the painful way, but I'd learned it well. Elijah ran back to me, his cheeks flushed from running. Daddy, watch me go down the slide. I'm watching, buddy, I call back. Show me what you've got. And as he climbed that ladder and slid down with pure joy on his face, I realized something. I'd won. Not because I defeated Melissa in court, but because I protected this child from chaos and given him stability. That was worth more than any verdict.